When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. From the City of Angels in Los Angeles, welcome to all my listeners out there in Radio Land. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver at caregiverdave.com, along with my lovely co-host, best-selling author and former mayor of Grover Beach in Central California, Debbie Peterson. And we're also coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on numerous syndicated radio and podcast networks on 30 global audio and video platforms. And we're so proud to be voted #1 caregiver podcast on FeedSpot out of thousands, and #1 caregiver podcast of the top 50 on Player FM. And we have an especially exciting show planned for you today. From me to we, the journey we're meant to share. Wounds are as universal as the weather, but when we build meaningful relationships, we find the strength to weather every storm together. Dr. Debra Palmer is a nurse practitioner, educator, and researcher with decades of experience guiding patients and communities toward healing and drawing on her own journey of overcoming childhood trauma, along with her clinical experience and advanced degrees in nursing practice and health research. She brings a unique perspective on resilience and recovery. Her work centers on empowering women, preventing illness, and promoting holistic well-being. Debra, so great to have you on the Caregiver Dave Show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Oh, the thrill is ours. And Debbie, welcome again, my wonderful co-host, Debbie, who's faithful every week. We appreciate you so much. And I always like to ask my guests, just who is Dr. Debra Palmer, and why was she placed on this earth?
Wow, that's a pretty loaded question.
I know.
I'm just like everybody else, a person with a mind, a body, and a spirit. We all share that basic humanity, and we're put in different places at different times that create different opportunities, and we make choices, and that's what's made me who I am. I was raised in the Midwest, married a sweetheart from my childhood after a failed divorce at age 16, and moved to California, and I've been out here ever since 1980. In the 80s. I have always had a passion for being a nurse. I did become a nurse against all odds. At 14, I was a mother, and I never gave up that dream, and it did finally happen, and I wrote a book about it, Between Wounded and Well, Lessons in Healing.
Did you say you were a mother at 14?
I was.
Oh my gosh.
What an amazing story. So now I have a question about that, because you're called, you're Dr. Debra, and you're a nurse practitioner. I don't think I've ever met a nurse practitioner who is a doctor as well. Tell us about the doctorate.
So about 10 or 15 years ago, the standards for healthcare providers were raised, and many professions were requiring a minimum of a doctorate degree. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, nurse practitioners, and a doctorate in nursing practice has become the standard. Most schools of nursing are teaching nurse practitioners with completion of a DNP degree. However, when I finished clinical practice and I had a DNP, I went into teaching, and I got lured into getting a PhD with the understanding that a research doctorate is the culmination of education when you're teaching at a graduate level. So I did start a PhD program and nearly gave up, a lot of obstacles, but I'm glad I did. It did finally happen. So my husband calls me Dr. Deb.
Yeah, I know another Dr. Deb too. She uses that. Yeah. Listen, from your experience as both a nurse and someone who's walked your own healing journey, what advice would you share with our audience of burned out caregivers?
Well, first of all, I would suggest that you never forget you're not alone. So often we think we're alone, and it's probably because we've convinced ourselves to be alienated from everybody else because we're afraid they'll find out we're not Superwoman or Superman. We have unrealistic expectations of ourselves. And sometimes it's out of fear of not meeting somebody's standards because you do need help, or just misinformation, not understanding what's humanly possible without cracking, and where the resources are. So all those reasons contribute to a sense of alone and alienation. So my advice would be to equip yourself with information and resources that help you on your journey, help you figure out when you're struggling, and to get the help that you need, because you're not meant to do this alone. That's why I say it's all about we, not me. That's where we're meant to be.
Well, so one of the things that a lot of our listeners experience is burnout. So I'm wondering if you can tell us the signs that let you know if you ever came up with being burnt out.
So as a brand new nurse working 12-hour night shifts in the intensive care, I started down a pattern of what I will call lack of self-care without realizing it. Just the stress and the enormity of the responsibility as a new RN in the intensive care, and constantly needing to upgrade my knowledge and to perform, I didn't realize I was not getting enough sleep. And over time, I started gaining weight. And I would say within 4 months, I had put on 20 pounds. And the other thing I noticed was my relationship with my new husband, we were newlyweds, was becoming quite strained. I was really lonesome at the time. We had moved to a brand new city. He had just started law school. And so I was feeling very alienated, very alone, and I wasn't reaching out for help. As a nurse, I knew better, but I just dug myself into a deeper hole. And it got worse, and I didn't realize it until I crashed. I hit bottom. I don't need to go into details. It wasn't pretty. But I pulled myself out with some professional help. And looking back, I would say there were signs that I wasn't catching, like not doing good self-care. I wasn't eating well, putting on weight, wasn't sleeping well. I was ignoring important relationships. I started backing off and just kind of avoiding people because I wasn't happy and I didn't want them to see me not being happy. So that avoidance behavior, I started calling in sick at times. And I had this strange pain in my stomach. It would come and go, and I got all kinds of medical tests. I could never figure out what it was. So years later, looking back as more trained in healthcare, I recognized I had symptoms of stress. I wasn't managing my stress load. I hadn't developed the tools and the resources to, first of all, even identify what stress was in my body, and that abdominal pain was definitely a sign of it. For some people, it might be migraines or back pain. So there are some subtle things that clue you on, and you should start listening to your body, or you do hit bottom.
Wow. So what obstacles have you faced in your journey as a caregiver, both personally and professionally? Because I understand that most nurses are notorious for getting burned out, right? They're overworked, they're underpaid, and they're just usually chain smokers. You're a caregiver also, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what obstacles have you faced in your journey as a caregiver? And I'm assuming, both personally and professionally, that caregiving is harder than nursing, or are they about the same?
I think they're very, very similar. I think the biggest obstacle was my own lack of awareness of making the connections between what I was thinking and what I believed and what my body was trying to tell me. I wasn't recognizing sometimes when my body was telling me, like when I was at ICU nurse, you're stressed out, you're overtired, you're hungry and you're not eating. So I hadn't made those connections, listening to my mind and my physical symptoms. And then even deeper, that awareness of what my feelings were, my emotional feelings. I was just stuffing them with food and overwork. So first of all, the awareness of just recognizing you need help. That was the biggest obstacle. I didn't even realize it. And then aside from that, I would say just not having resources. As a young person, I came from a very poor family. We didn't have health insurance. My parents had not graduated from high school. We came from a place of need, and I find that to be a big obstacle for me back then, as well as patients today. If you don't have resources, if you don't have caregiver support, and you have to rely on family. I relied on family to help with childcare when I was 14 and had that baby. But a lot of families are spread out now. We don't have as close-knit families in some communities, or they're much smaller than they used to be. So that's another obstacle, the lack of resources.
So you raised that baby by yourself at 14? You had any help?
I went into the foster care system, and as soon as it was legal for me to get married at age 16, I got married. but it lasted for less than a year. So I was married, divorced on my own at 17, and just finishing my first nursing program, a licensed practical nurse diploma. It was a 10-month program, and I started caring for my son.
That's amazing. How is he today?
He's 53, has a lovely family, 2 daughters, a career. I'm proud to say all 3 of my children did go on and get into UC schools, and they're responsible citizens. And my goal of breaking cycles of dysfunction, teen pregnancy, and addiction and mental health problems, I strove for that. And I think it was helped by the fact that I did have a good education. I was able to go on to college because I had a lovely head nurse who recognized that I had a desire and some potential, and she really encouraged me to go back to school and become a registered nurse, which is what I did eventually do within a year of that first training program.
That's amazing. You talked about gaining weight. Would you consider yourself an emotional overeater? Is that what caused the weight gain?
That's a really loaded question, and I found a very loaded answer. One of my first mentors as a nurse practitioner after getting a master's degree was Dr. Vince Folletti, and he published a study called the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And what he discovered was the more adversities a child has while their brain is still growing, the more harm to a center in the brain that is a self-soothing center. And for many, it's overeating. Some it's drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex addiction, work addictions, that self-soothing overdoing. And so, yes, for me, for many years, that was my way of self-soothing, was overeating.
Wow.
Yeah. So you've already mentioned a number of ways you overcame challenges. You had a wonderful mentor and encouraging people, and you made sure you got yourself educated. Obviously, you worked hard. Well, probably you wouldn't have burned out if you weren't working so hard. But are there other ways that you overcame the challenges you were facing?
A big one was an aha I had in a conversation with a colleague who was sharing with me. She was in therapy for something called codependent behavior. This was back in the 80s. And I thought, codependent, what is that? And the more I listened, I went, oh my gosh, that's me. It's when you are such a good caregiver. You feel like you're their savior. You can fix everything. They need you to the point where you stop caring for yourself without even realizing it. You neglect personal, physical, and or emotional health for yourself. And that was me. That was my big aha. So I read everything I could about what codependency was, read a couple books by Melody Beattie, Codependent No More. I learned to understand that adult children from alcoholics often become codependent, but just being in a dysfunctional environment with a lot of adversities, you learn to become a pleaser, to get attention. And that pleasing sometimes is excessive to the point where you don't know when to stop.
Wow. Along the way, what aha moments have helped you cope with difficulties in growing stronger?
Well, that one that I just mentioned, the understanding that I was codependent, was one of the biggest aha moments. But the other one was that my understanding who I was, that didn't really happen until I started writing a memoir. And I started reflecting back on myself. You know, there's this famous saying, I don't know if it was Socrates, but it was during that time frame. He said, the unexamined self isn't worth living. And I took a double take, and I thought, what does that mean? And as I reflected over 40 years of my journals during COVID, I came upon some themes in my life. And one of them was woundedness and healing. But that my natural personality was extremely filled with curiosity. I questioned everything ad nauseum. I drove my mother crazy. Incidentally, my mother, I did not know until the completion of my memoir, after talking with her physician, was what we call on the autism spectrum. And back when I was growing up, we didn't know what that was. I just knew my mom was different than all the other moms. She wasn't very emotional. She didn't have girlfriends. She told me I was too emotional. And I kind of felt rejected, or we just didn't have this really good connection. But I always wondered why, and all through nursing school, I was so curious, looking for answers. Why was my family different than everybody else's? How could I be different? What more do I need to do? So this natural curiosity is following your gut feeling when your heart and your mind are questioning things. Listen to them, honor them. It's a voice inside of us that wants us to be well, but sometimes we want to ignore it because maybe we're ashamed of something, or we feel guilty, or we've been led down a path to believe things that aren't true. And questioning it and looking for evidence that validates what your true feelings are, I think was a big aha moment for me, understanding how important that was.
How old were you when you went into the foster care system?
Well, believe it or not, at birth, my mother put me in an orphanage.
Wow.
And I was there for 6 months. And then when she retrieved me, she still wasn't able to care for me, but she had to get there before that 6 months, or I would have been given up for adoption. So I was put in foster care for another 3 to 6 months. And then when I was a teenager, pregnant, I ended up in the foster care system again.
So what was your experience with foster care? Some people, tell how it was a nightmare. Some said it was okay. Well, how was your experience?
Well, my experience was positive. I wrote a book review for a book called Waiting for June. It's a book all about foster care in America. Mm-hmm. In general, foster care had a lot of problems. It was rewarding systems for the more kids you could get in foster care, rather than putting money into preventing the needs for foster care, like adequate housing, food, nutrition, healthcare, etc. Right. But I was fortunate. My social worker had a really good friend who volunteered to be a temporary foster home for me. And I looked her up 3 years ago, after 50 years. And I found her. She had moved across the country, and I met her family. They remembered me. I had just a wonderful visit with her. It was a very loving family.
Cool.
A wonderful story. You titled your memoir Between Wounded and Well, Lessons in Healing. What does that phrase, between wounded and well, then mean to you personally?
I would say it's that pause between the something's wrong, I've got an injury or an insult, and the concluding days of our life, so to speak, when we just pause and we start a process of letting go of that which is harming us, what doesn't do good for us, and taking on that what we need to make us feel more fulfilled, more healthy, finding meaning in our life, finding purpose in our life. So it's a continuous process. It comes in cycles, and it's got to be reciprocal. It's always the process of accepting something, receiving, and letting go. Continuously giving and receiving. It's that gift of giving and taking on, and sharing your gifts and talents and skills, and accepting those of others that actually helps us in that process of healing.
Wow. Well, as a wellness provider or as a wellness promoter, how do you define healing? Not just physically, but on a deeper emotional or spiritual level?
Healing is not an outcome or a destination. It's the journey, so to speak. And it's got to be all-encompassing. Our mind, which is a combination of what our thinking is, our cognitive skills, and our emotions, and our physical sensations, really feeling what our body's experiencing, whether it's tension or joy or relief or fear, and connecting that with a higher power, something that gives you meaning and purpose outside of your own body. In nursing, we just call it holistic healing.
Well, is there advice that you would give to caregivers who are struggling just to make it through the day? Words of wisdom?
Yes. Stop. Stop. Take time out. And really assess what you're feeling. Make those connections between what you're thinking you have to get done in the day, what your body is telling you can get done in the day, and ask for help if you need help. I think that's the biggest thing, recognizing that we're not meant to be in this journey alone. Nobody should feel like they're the sole caregiver of somebody. They should have some help. Even if it's just through the internet, a support group, just really assess your situation, but take time out. So often we're in such a hurry. We're so overcommitted, trying to take care of our loved ones' needs that we neglect our own. And I believe I read the statistic is about 50% of caregivers do not outlive the people they're caring for, in part because they don't reflect and stop and determine what their self-care needs are and act on them.
Yeah, it never keeps getting higher and higher. When I first started, it was 30%. Then it went up to 40% for Alzheimer's. Now you quote 50%.
I think it's because our demographics are changing. We're getting older, all of us.
Less tolerant, huh? Well, I can't believe how fast our time's gone today. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Let's quickly talk about your book and what you were hoping to accomplish, what you're hoping readers get out of it, and anything else that you want to talk about the book.
Thank you. Yeah, I started out writing the book in hopes of helping nurses, but then I realized it's written on so many levels. It's really meant for not just people in healthcare. I did it during COVID because I was focused on what was on TV and all the hospitals and the nurses. It reminded me of a time when I was an ICU nurse in the HIV wards, when we were all fearful. We didn't know what the patients had, how to protect ourselves. So I wanted it to be a resource for nurses to be proud of who we are. It's a history book as well. 50 years of the nursing profession and the healthcare profession. It changed dramatically in 50 years when we took on the concept of prevention care and health promotion. So it's a textbook on history. It's a textbook on the understanding of nursing, but it's a storybook as well. Any memoir usually takes on another genre. And I realized mine took on a romance component and a detective component. My husband that I've been married to for 46 years, I've known him since I was 6. His father married my mother after they were both widowed. So there's that romance component. And the detective part is just constantly being on alert. What's wrong in this family? Walking on eggshells, trying to make sense of things. Sorting out the facts versus my emotions, and recognizing that there's nothing wrong with me. It was what happened to me. And what's next is, what am I going to do with it? And I share that universal experience through my story. And for the reader to put themselves in my story, use their history, their understanding of how it applies in their own life for their own healing. And most important, that they would always recognize you should never give up hope. Hope is the reason we stay motivated to want to be well. It's the reason we come up with a plan to stay healthy or to help our loved one, hoping to get our loved one through something. You've got to keep hope center in your life. It's what gives you your power.
Sure. How can people reach you, Dr. Deb?
I have a website, www.debrapalmer.com. And in about a month, I will have links so people can click on that and find out how to order my book on Amazon or which bookstores it'll be in. I hope to follow that up in the next 2 months after that with a Spanish translation, which is currently in process, and an Audible book.
Making me feel bad. I should do that with my book, Spanish translation.
Well, in healthcare, working in a community clinic, I had to get people to help me teach classes to the community. And I relied a lot on Spanish speakers that could interpret and share the messages I had to give for my families. And so I've decided that we're not language inclusive enough, especially in healthcare and social services. That was really apparent for me when I lived in El Cajon, California, right after Desert Storm, and we started having an influx of Arabic-speaking patients, and we had nobody that understood them. And that was my big aha moment. Wow, we have to be inclusive of appropriate language and culture if we want to share messages.
Mayor Debbie, how can people reach you, find out what you're all about?
Oh, you just said it, Dave, mayordebbie.com. And Deborah said it too. Go to Amazon. I have an Integrity 101 series. If you just look on Amazon, Integrity 101, Debbie Peterson.
Great. And remember, all our live shows become recorded pod and video casts on all your favorite platforms that I mentioned. And my number one best-selling book, It's Your Life Too, How to Survive and Thrive as a Caregiver, available on Amazon, wherever books are sold. Also, my free membership website, caregiverdave.com, or you can also schedule a free 30-minute initial coaching call. You can also join my community of 34,000 caregivers on Facebook. We have lots of tools, resources, videos, this radio show, and much, much more. So again, a big thank you to all my listeners out there and you guys for coming on the show all over the world, for tuning in every Wednesday and making us the number one caregiver podcast on the internet. So until next week, same time, same channel. May God richly bless you all. Bye-bye. Dave Nasani, the Caregiver's Caregiver, has just released his 6th book entitled It's My Life Too, Thrive to Stay Alive as a Caregiver. It was specifically written for caregivers who know they should be putting their needs first, but just don't know how. Dave is the sole caregiver to his wife, Charlene, since 1996. He knows firsthand what caregivers are going through, because he is one. He now speaks all across the country, offering caregivers his amazing caregiver support package. Even the airlines tell us that in the event of an emergency, to put your oxygen mask on first, before you help your child with their mask. They know that those who don't heed their advice often black out, thus becoming unable to help either themselves or their child. And caregivers are exactly the same way. It's My Life Too, Thrive and Stay Alive as a Caregiver will help caregivers who are neglecting their sleep, diet, and social life and learn to put their needs first. Pick up your copy today or buy one for your special caregiver, on sale everywhere and at caregiverdave.com.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing.